BAP by webinar, and some things will be different and some things will be same from face to face, and that's what we're here to talk about. So welcome very much. I'm really excited that you're all here with us, and that you let us doing this experiment with you, that we haven't trained others to do brief action planning online before, and so this is a learning for us as well, and so we really are excited about your feedback and your experience here. So you are going to see a version of this in GoToMeeting, and Danielle will talk you through the fundamentals of what you need to know.
All right, I think, have we had all of you on GoToMeeting before for COP or, yeah, community of practice calls at all? I know we've had you, Marcia. Roxanne and Lee, are you familiar with GoToMeeting?
Yes, I am, Roxanne.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was a while back.
Okay, so you've got, I think, one of the most pertinent things is the mute and unmute. It looks like you're all doing audio by phone, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Marsha.
Yes.
All right, so you can just use your regular mute button, or you can use *6 to mute and unmute. If you have a hold feature, just don't use that one because it'll start playing music for us on this end. And all of you can see the screen. We check that. The chat box. Do you all see where the chat box is? It should just be a talking bubble. Okay. The chat box you can use to chat in while April's presenting. There'll be at least one point where she'll ask you to chat in, and I'll be monitoring the chat box for anything that comes that way instead of verbally. We're recording the webinar, so I just want to make sure you guys have a heads up about that, and that'll be helpful for the couple who weren't able to join us. And I'm wondering, do you have any questions about the features before we go on? I'll take that as a no. If you have any questions along the way, hopefully you can use the chat box and you can ask me them that way. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to you, April.
Great, thank you. Yes, so just sort of your mute and your chat box are probably going to be the two important ones. But if any of you are phoning in from home and a dog starts barking or something starts happening, your mute's always handy to know about, and we will be asking you to use the chat box at points along the way. So little housekeeping issues. As you know that you aren't going to get a copy of the slides today because the handouts contain everything that you need, and we'll talk to you about the materials that have been generated for you as webinar trainers. As Danielle said, please don't put us on mute. If you put us on mute, we hear your lovely hold music on our end. So, sorry, please don't put us on hold, because then we hear your hold music on our end. And as always, if you have questions, your questions are welcome at absolutely any time. I have a couple of, like, do you have questions now slides in here, but it might be that you have questions along the way. You are welcome to just simply speak up and jump in, or you can try to use the chat box, which, because of I've changed technology, so I can't see the chat box when sharing my screen with you, but Danielle will be monitoring the chat box for me. So if you do have a question, you can also do it that way as well. So here's what we're doing. We're doing 3 webinars together. We're doing, and they're 90 minutes each. We're starting today. The one on January 16th is happening now. That is where we all are together. And tomorrow you are either enrolled, Wednesday you're either enrolled in the 8 a.m. or the 10 a.m. practice teaching opportunity, which will also be a webinar. And then January 30th at 8 a.m. will be our final one. There are some assignments. Some will be emailed to me between webinars 2 and 3, and there'll be one practice teaching opportunity, which is webinar 2 happening on Tuesday, and that is the extent of the work outside the webinars. I just wanted to alert you to that, and there'll be lots of opportunities for questions about that. So we're going to do introductions. Sounds like some of you know each other, and actually all of you might know each other, but I don't know any of you, or any of you well anyway. So I'd love to know your name, the place you work, like where are you geographically, your role, and something you'd hoped you would learn. I'm going to be making a list of that and writing them down, and then at the end of this webinar series, we'll come back to that list and see how we did in meeting and accommodating the things that you would hope to learn. I will go first. This is me. I'm April Lawrence, and there's my slightly more professional self and my happy place, so you can see a little bit about me there. I'm located down here in Vancouver. I'm a trainer and a master trainer at CCMI, which means both that I deliver the trainings just like you do and that I train others to become trainers. And something I would like to learn, I'm really interested in knowing more about how you imagine using online training to spread refaction planning, given your geography in Northern Health. So I'm really excited to be here with you. So here's how we're going to do introductions, because we can't see each other, so we can't really just go around the room. I would love to go east to west, because I'm not sure where any of you are. So is there anybody in the white section of that map that goes from sort of Fort Nelson at the top to Tumbler Ridge down there? And if so, would you mind going first and introducing yourself?
So when Cindy gets on, she's in that location.
Oh, and I think I just heard a ping of someone joining us. Hi, who's that?
It's Roxanne just coming back on the line.
Oh, did you get checked off? Oh, Roxanne, I'm sorry. Isn't technology wonderful? Okay, good. So when Cindy comes, someone said that she would be up in that white quadrant up in the right-hand corner. What about that sort of bluey-green central quadrant, starting in the east of McBride-ish and working west? Who do we have on the line with us from there?
Roxanne is from close to Valemount.
Oh, okay. Nice to meet you, Roxanne. Would you mind letting us know your last name would be helpful to me, and your role and something you would like to learn?
Sorry, I just got back on the line.
I know. No pressure.
Hey, my name's Roxanne Coates. I'm a QI advisor for Northern Health. I have a regional role. As was mentioned, I live in the Robson Valley, close to Valemount. Okay. Something I would like to learn is obviously conducting brief action planning via webinar. Specifically, I have an opportunity, pardon me? Oh, and specifically we have an opportunity to speak with, to conduct this with Stroke Rehab Collaborative Group for Northern Health. And so we have actually 5 groups across Northern Health, and not all of them obviously can come to Prince George or to one centralized location. So this will be very handy to be able to enable them to take the training.
Absolutely. That's really neat, Roxanne. And so is there anyone else in that sort of greeny blue chunk marching west from near Valemount?
So this is Marcia. My last name's Birchie, and I live in Prince George. And my role is a regional quality improvement advisor as well. And I do a lot of work in the Northeast, and I have done some work in Terrace and Kitimat and Prince Rupert and Smithers. And then I've done some work in Prince George and Quesnel and Burns Lake and Vanderhoof and Fraser Lake. So something I would like to learn is, I guess for me, is just some of the logistics around offering BAP webinar distance learning, like, you know, how many hours of training is it? What's the recommendation between the different sessions? Because I think it's a great model, but and I think and what is there recommendations about the time between the different sessions? So I'm thinking people are really busy. It's hard to get them to come like back. So you don't want to like have them be too close together, but then you don't want them to be too far apart either. So because that is one of my fears as we offer brief action planning webinar series, that we don't have people coming back, or we've scheduled the sessions too close together and they are like, I can't possibly take all of that time off in that short period of time. So
Okay, I'm optimistic so far that we're going to be supporting what you're hoping to learn, but I'm curious about the rest of it. So, in continuing in that little green chunk, I know we haven't heard Lee's voice yet. Can you tell us where you are on that map?
Hi, so Lee Cameron here, and I'm out in the northwest. So located, like my home base is in Terrace.
Mm.
I'm a brief action planner trainer and have been involved for, well, since 2014. And all my work has been actually with Marcia. Thank you, Marcia. My current role, I just started January 3rd, is the Northwest Specialist Coach, so working with the physicians and the specialists in facility throughout the Northwest. I'm coming out of a 3.5 term with practice support coach within the Northwest, and I was able to work at 3 of the different communities, some of which are very interested in brief action planning. So I'm very excited about this. Next, what it's going to look like in the delivery, and back to the brief action planning if in my current role and what that looks like for uptake delivery in the context of in facility, so in particular in acute care and how it relates to the rehab approach and patient goal setting. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no, so I'm quiet for a moment because I'm just scribbling what you said, so I can make sure that we have a chance to come back to that. Well, ladies, thank you for being here, and hopefully April, Kim, and Cindy will find their way to us over time. That would be lovely. So, as usual, we have some ground rules that are probably going to look pretty similar to face-to-face, but a little bit different. Confidentiality is important if we speak about patient experience or our own personal experience. We'll be doing a little bit of real play, and we can certainly share our learning experience with each other, but we'll keep each other's details to ourselves because that's just only fair. If it's not working, if what I'm doing is not working for you, please say so. And this includes like technology, if we're cutting in and out, if something strange is happening, please use the chat box to communicate with Danielle, who might be able to sort you out. It might mean you logging off and logging back on again. But if either what I am doing or your technology is not working, please let us know. And the last request is use your voice. This is vastly more interesting if we have the opportunity to hear each other's voices, and there will be requests to participate in exercises. And so please, I'm hoping that you are all willing to use your voice to work together today. So you know how this works, right? We've got the hats. When you see the hat, we are talking to each other as trainers. When the hat goes away, I am talking to you as if you were learners in brief action planning. And so that what you remember from your face-to-face training will continue on today. The hats are only going to show up today. And what we're going to do today in terms of the training is show you the sections that are different online than they are in the face-to-face. And these differences will form your practice teaching opportunities. So what you see today are the sections that you'll be able to use to do the practice teaching opportunities. And then because the didactic slides are largely the same as you would suspect, but these are the things that are actually different. So we've got some materials for you. Danielle, would you mind telling them about the materials we have?
Yeah, you bet. So we've started up a private page. Only the people with the URL will be able to see it. So I'm going to send that to you by email. And please don't share it with anyone else. It's our top secret page for you. You'll find there a learning plan broken into 4 parts that's specifically for webinar. You'll find a little bit of a supplement to your regular training manual that has things to think about like timelines, different technology, facilitating or encouraging participation online, those kinds of things would be in the resource section. And there's a little bit of an overview of what's different from the face-to-face training to the webinar training in terms of content. You'll also find the webinar slides there, PowerPoint slides, as well as PDFs for you to print, and all the handouts that you would use for the webinar series, which are also in the face-to-face set, but this is just a smaller chunk of those handouts. I'll also be posting your homework assignments and the recordings of these webinars that we're doing together there, and any other resources that we come up with during our time together.
So you'll see that the webinar slides are chopped into 4 webinars. 4 webinars of 90 minutes is how we've generally delivered brief action planning. We find that it works. But the same chunking principles that exist in your face-to-face manual and the same fundamental requirements for exposure that exist in your manual, face-to-face manual, apply here as well. So you still have choices in how much material you present, what you present, and how you do it. So a lot of those choices still exist. It's presented to you as we do it, but I'd like to make it clear that is not the only way to do it. We've done that just for your convenience, not to suggest that it's something that needs to be that way. So, and that was a hat slide. I forgot to put our hat up. Do you have any questions so far about the materials or how they're put together?
I just want to say thank you that you have just highlighted what the differences are, so that because that just really helps as a learner too, because you know the other stuff, so then it's just nice to go into. Yeah. Anyways.
Good. That was sort of our hope, and you'll let us know how that worked. Does anyone have any questions about what we've shown you in terms of just the materials? Well, okay, then we'll crash on. So let's talk about what's happened so far. This is a hat slide. You'll notice the introductions are different in a webinar because we can't see each other. We can't just look at for hands and we can't go around the room. On the slide deck, you have 2 choices. You can request a photo slide in advance from all your learners, which would look a lot like the photo slide I showed you of me, where they could answer the questions that you wanted and put a photo of themselves and then read that essentially to the group when their slide comes up as you're going through introductions. You'll still need a way to capture people who said they would send you one and didn't, but it can be a nice way to do things if if you know in advance who your learners are. Or you can use a map like we did. Just getting volunteers randomly from your collection of people in cyberspace tends to be a little chaotic, and it's hard to know if you missed people. So these are the 2 options that we offer you, but you might very well have another one. There might be a way that you prefer to do, and of course that would be absolutely fine, and we would love to know about it. If you find a way that really, really works, we'd love it if you shared it with us. So the webinars are chunked, and they're chunked like this. They're 90 minutes each, give or take, depending on participation. I've had some terrifyingly non-participatory webinars that have been over and much closer to an hour, and some where we're like wringing every moment out of it that we can, and we go right up to the 90 minutes. So it depends, but they're designed to be 90 minutes. Webinar 1 does Give No Advice in the Spirit. Webinar 2 does Ask, Tell, Ask. Webinar 3 is BAP itself. And webinar 4 tends to be application to practice, or I've included BAP in groups. If I've got a group that's particularly interested in how to support BAP with multiple people at once, group medical visits, peer-led support groups, that sort of thing. So if you're particularly interested in this, let me know, and we'll figure out how to communicate this with you. It's not standard BAP training practice, but I insert it for groups that are interested, and I'd be happy to share that information with you. So this is how we've chunked it. And you'll recall from your main manual that you don't have to teach people Ask, Tell, Ask for them to learn brief action planning. You have to teach them the spirit. So it's going to be up to you sort of how you structure things and what you include. So you've got the same choices in the webinar that you had in the face-to-face. But this is what you've got because we find this works for us. And when we do webinar series, we tend to do them a week apart, like every Monday at 9 a.m. It tends to be what works for groups and works for trainers too, so they can block their time. So that's how we tend to do it, but it's certainly not the only way to do it. And there's definitely such a thing as too long between. I would say more than that starts to get problematic. You can use the chunking principles in your manual, and you can completely do this differently if that works for you. You can take the same material and turn it into 6 one-hour ones. You can take things out that, that we say you can. So all of your main principles apply. So your mission, even when you take your hat off, is to think about this and watch with your hat kind of on the side of your head. And think about, if you will, what's different about learning via webinar? Like, what is different about your experience versus being face-to-face? Do you feel connected at all? Do you feel connected to me? Do you feel connected to each other? Does it matter? What could make it more? Do you care between webinars? Or as soon as you hang up that phone line and turn that computer screen off, do you care at all? Are you checking your email right now? If you find yourself drifting away and doing that over the course of the training? What's it like to do an assignment for someone you can't see? How is that different? And given your power relationship and your technology, what can you do differently that I can't do? Because you've got different technology and a different power relationship with your learners than I have with you. You may have power to make demands that I do not have. You might not choose to make these demands, but let's talk about it for a minute. You work for the organization that writes their paycheck. You have a different relationship with your learners than I have with mine. You could ask them to do shared viewing. You could say you have to have 2 people in a room to enroll in brief action planning, because there's some peer pressure then to pay attention. And do you have breakout room technology to say, like, we're going to break you into technologically different rooms now, then you all can practice amongst yourselves. Do you want to sort of support participation and practice in that way? Are you going to do things like required phone practice to say to people, welcome to Brief Action Planning Training. You'll have gotten an email with the phone number and the name of your practice buddy. In the last 10 minutes of this email, you're going to hang up the webinar and you're going to phone each other and you're going to practice the skills. So you could do required phone practice in a way that I cannot. You can make assignments mandatory, but if you do that, then what happens if people don't do them? Like, what would that be? And you might have the opportunity for like video distance learning with an in-room facilitator, like 6 people in a room and you online with them, and then you stop for 15 minutes for them to practice and an in-room facilitator who could help them. You might have options that we aren't going to talk about because of power differences and technological differences. So there might be some things that you can do that I won't speak of, and it doesn't mean that because you shouldn't, it's because we don't usually, but you might have lots of options that I don't have. And there might be other things that you're thinking about right now that you could do to make this more effective, or the skills more ingrained, or encourage participation or practice. The trick about online learning is there's just not as much opportunity to practice, and that's what gets tricky. So I'll stop there and say, what questions do you have about that question of technology, power, and the relationship?
Going back to the having people come over time,
Mm-hmm.
have you seen any retention issues?
Not ones that I would call retention issues. And it depends on the group, and it depends on how invested the group is in it. I've done a webinar where we had 30 people signed up for it, all of whom were volunteers with an organization. And 3 people showed up on the first webinar, and those 3 people showed up for every single one because they were the ones who were committed. Other people were volunteers. There was like the option to watch it online later, and that was considered the same as attending the training. So, and I've had people say, I'm really sorry I have to miss next week because I've got a thing. Like I have a staff meeting I can't get out of, but I promise I'll watch it and I'll hear your voice the next time after that. And those people who are invested enough to say so, it's really true. The people who are going to take their online learning seriously, take it seriously the whole way through. In my head, I can think of a handful of people who came to the first one and then I've never heard their voice again, but it hasn't been a huge issue. So that's my experience. Does that answer your question at all?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And what else is anyone wondering about right now?
Yeah, I had similar questions that Marcia just brought up. Thanks.
Okay.
I do have one more. I'm a bit worried about, I know homework assignments are good because it just reinforces the learning, but I'm just a bit worried that people are going to, and maybe it's my own fear, but it's just that people are going to balk at the idea of having an assignment. But maybe the opposite. Maybe they're, you know, they bulk, but then they're like, they get into it because they're doing something.
And that's a good question. And that is one reason why we've created an assignment for you guys, is partly so you can have the experience of having an assignment for a webinar for a, quote, trainer who you can't actually see. Partly so you can, we actually think that the assignment would be useful to you. We haven't just made it busy work, but also to have the experience of seeing what would it feel like to have to do an assignment for someone who you've never met and may never see again, and what does all of this feel like? As much as anything, we would like to open, have you experience the kind of emotional and relationship aspect of learning online. So that is a very good question. And so how could you structure those? What would it be important for them to do between webinars? And what isn't it? And how could you support it and make it feel useful for them? Are all really good questions. And like all adult learning situations, the answer is probably not the same for every learner you're going to have in front of you, but you're going to make the best choices you can. And we're going to talk about those things, and we'll see what you think. So you're thinking all of the right things, that's for sure. Are there, go ahead, yeah.
Do you have an evaluation specifically around this kind of, I'm just thinking the first couple groups we tried this with, it might be a good idea to have an evaluation, and it probably is a good idea to try it with a couple groups first and not just open it broadly to anybody. And then that way we could get some learning from that. Yes. I'm just wondering if you have an evaluation that you send people specifically on participating in the BAP webinars.
We use essentially the same evaluation for our webinars as we do our face-to-face, because they are supposed to perform identically, right? Okay. Theoretically, it shouldn't be, it's a different experience, but the outcomes shouldn't be any different, and the experience shouldn't be any different. So Danielle will be talking to you a bunch about that. The third webinar will be a lot of the technological things. You will also be getting an evaluation at the end of this webinar. So you'll see the sort of thing your learner would get at the end of webinar 1. Because you'll be getting it from us about this webinar 1, as the snake eats its own tail and the whole weird train the trainer aspect. So absolutely evaluation is critical, and we'll be sharing with you the questions we ask. You might choose to ask additional questions about technology or about experience, and that would be completely up to you. But yes, evaluations are critical. And starting with 1 or 2 groups and cutting your teeth there is never a bad plan. Anything else? Okay, so let's get started. This is going to be incredibly disjointed because I'm just going to drop you right in the middle of where we would be in the training and where things get different. This is where we have, we've done the expert, like, you know, would you be interested in, we've done the sort of like persuasion by expert, that's the name of the activity. And then now we're talking about another way to do things. This is the first introduction of the concept of motivational interviewing and how we teach Give No Advice Online. So that gives you a little orientation in where we are in the training, but we're just going to sort of drop ourselves right in the middle there. So hats off, and here we go. So what is motivational interviewing anyway? Here's a definition from the Miller and Rolnick book, Motivational Interviewing, Helping People Change. Motivational interviewing is a collaborative conversation style to strengthen a person's own motivation and commitment to change. So I'm really curious about what words might be jumping out at you as you look at this definition. And I'd love it if you typed them into your chat box, which is that conversation bubble on the right-hand side, probably at the bottom of the list of what you have. If you could type in the words that are popping out to you, Danielle will read them for us.
Collaborative. And we've got 2 of you noticing collaborative. Conversation style is another one.
So this group's, go ahead, Danielle, one more.
One more is motivation, and And commitment to change is from Roxanne there. I would add strengthen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You've begun to notice it's a collaborative conversation. It's collaborative. You're working together with someone. It's a conversation style. It's a way of speaking together as opposed to a prescription you might write. And it strengthens a person's own motivation. That's the word that jumps out to me, is a person's own motivation and commitment for change. But probably what's important here is it's not a person's motivation to finally get around to doing the things that we told them to. It's helping the person find their own reasons why they might undertake this change. And I think, and for me, that's where the sort of the difference lives in how we often do things. So here's another definition of motivational interviewing, and I like this one as kind of an emotional definition, that how do I feel in this conversation? Am I dancing with someone? Or am I wrestling with someone? And if you could just throw into the chat box a couple of words that describe dancing. What's it like to dance with somebody?
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. We've got Marcia saying fun.
Fun is certainly one of them, and it can be kind of fluid, and it's mutual, and sort of people are working together when they're dancing. What are a few words that describe wrestling?
I'd say rough.
Right, can be a little more rough, absolutely.
Competition?
It's competitive, right. You're working less together and more against one another. It's a little more about power. Someone wins when you're wrestling and someone loses, and that's not the case when you're actually dancing together. And so if you're in a conversation with someone and you feel more like you're wrestling, like you're fighting them to do something, then that's decidedly not how motivational interviewing is supposed to feel. Motivational interviewing conversations are supposed to feel like dancing. And if someone doesn't want to dance, we're not going to make them. But if someone's willing to dance with us, it should feel much more collaborative and much less like something that you have won to make them do a thing. And so I like keeping this in the back of my mind because the bottom of my stomach tells me if I'm doing MI more than my head does. What do I feel like is happening here? So what happens when we just tell people what to do? And I'd love to leave the chat box behind, and I'd love to hear people's voices. Like, what happens? Either when people tell you what to do, what happens? Or what do you notice when it goes the other way around?
This is Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Can you hear me?
I can, Lee.
Okay, so autonomy and sovereignty and all those good words come up when I think about it for myself in the context when someone tells me what to do, if they're working and relating to me in that way.
That it damages those good things like your sovereignty?
And your autonomy and all those things, those basic, from the time we're 2 years old, whether we identify or call it those words or not, but everybody wants to have that. They want to be able to actualize that and feel that in their life.
Absolutely. And I think it's very easy to imagine how we feel when people tell us what to do. And sometimes we might forget that people feel the same way when we, maybe with the best of intentions, sort of accidentally tell people what to do. It can damage autonomy and sovereignty. And you're right, it's from the time we were 2 that we tend to get away with telling children what to do a little bit more, but I don't know a single adult that likes it. And did I hear someone else start to speak, and did I roll over top of them? Okay, good, because just please, if that happens, because sometimes it can on a webinar, do make sure that you get back in there, because I'd love to hear your voices. Well, here's my ambivalence and what I hear from others. I asked for a banjo for my birthday, and I have been really struggling to find a way to practice like I should, to practice, to learn the darn thing. And I've been really struggling to kind of get it to fit in my life. And people say things to me like, well, all you have to do is practice 15 minutes a day. And I think, oh yeah, right, because your banjo practice is going so well, and 15 minutes a day might work for you, but I've also got the 60 minutes a day I'm supposed to exercise, and the half an hour a day I'm supposed to spend cooking fresh food at home, and the 50 minutes a day I'm supposed to spend meditating for mindfulness and all this other stuff. And it's not that I don't think I can, I haven't yet. And when people just offer me simple solutions that are things that would work for them, but that wouldn't work for me, I wonder if they think I'm stupid. Like, has it never occurred to them that I've thought about trying 15 minutes a day and it just hasn't worked for me, or that I've thought about some of the things that they've said and maybe even tried some of them? But when people just tell me, oh, well, it's very simple, all you have to do is, I confess I stop listening. Because what they're saying is it's all very simple for them, and that's what they would do. But it's got nothing to do with what I would do. And I get frustrated. And honestly, I stopped listening to them, and I've stopped asking people for help figuring this out because they just tell me what they would do. And it's not helpful at all. And I'm not any closer to figuring this out than I would have been before they stopped talking. But there's another way to talk to people. And here's the first skill we're going to learn together. Over the course of this webinar, we'll learn 3 skills. We'll learn the skill for give no advice, which is what we're about to learn. We'll learn ask, tell, ask, and we'll learn brief action planning. So this first skill is a conversation formula, if you will, that helps do what Emma said it would do. It's called give no advice, and so it's this conversation formula that helps people think through their own motivation. What motivates me as opposed to what do you think should motivate me? It's used with people who are still ambivalent, right? And ambivalence is that when you feel 2 ways about something, often about a change, where you can see all the reasons why you would bother, but you still aren't quite ready to start or start all the way. Because we're going to learn brief action planning, which is for people who are really ready to make a plan. It might be a very small plan like, well, maybe I could just smoke 2 cigarettes before I go to work in the morning instead of 4 cigarettes before I go to work in the morning. But they're ready to do something. People who are still saying things like, well, I could, but I'm not really sure I want to, they're still ambivalent. And this give no advice skill is a great way to work with them. This could be that friend that we all have a friend like this who every time we see him or her they say the same thing of like, well, I really have to clean out that garage because it's driving me crazy. But they've been saying it for 16 months. This is a great thing with them. It could be that patient or the client who's thinking about trying something but isn't quite there yet. And you'll hear things like, well, I could, but I'm not sure. That person who's just not ready yet, this is a great skill to work with them. Let me show you what it looks like. You've got a handout called Give No Advice, and all of the questions I'm about to show you are right on there. So it looks like this. You would say, what are the 3 best reasons for making this change? Assuming that the topic's already come up because your friend has said, oh, that garage, I have to do something about it. Or your trainer has said, good grief, that banjo, I've just got to find a way to sort of get it in my life. And they would say, well, these are my reasons. And then you would say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important would you say it is to make this change? And they would answer your question. Then you'll ask them, why is it a 4 and not a 0? And let them answer. And you'll say, well, how could you go about doing this? And they'll imagine that out loud. You'll offer them a short summary of their motivations only, not the full story, just their reasons why they would, not every single detail that they've told you. And then you would say, well, what do you think you will do? And they should be the only person talking at this point. They'll tell you what they think they might do. And they might not decide to do it, but like, what are they thinking? That they're now thinking about a plan. So it looks like this. The lovely thing is you don't actually need to say anything that isn't written down here. In fact, you shouldn't say anything that isn't written down here because this is designed to actually stop you from giving any advice, which is this instinct a lot of us have. So it looks like this is an activity. In Give No Advice, you would ask me only these questions, and I would respond like this. But instead of using this slide, let's use this one. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take turns. So if all of you wouldn't mind being my helper and helping me work through these things, and so you'll just take turns and one at a time either ask me the questions or offer me a short summary. And we'll march through this one person at a time so you can all work with me to be my helper. And I would really appreciate that. So who is willing to do the first statement, the first bullet point there for me? Just go ahead and speak.
Are you saying that tell me about something that you're thinking of changing or doing?
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah.
Who's willing to do that one?
It's Marsha. I'll do that one.
Thanks, Marsha. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So April, tell me about something that you are thinking of changing or doing that you haven't changed or done yet.
Well, I've owned this banjo for a year and a half, and it's not like I want to be suddenly pick it up and be virtuoso at it. Like I want to actually play it regularly. I want to kind of hold it in my hands a few times a week, even if it's not the perfect practice schedule. I think I want to drop the idea it has to be perfect, and I want to start picking it up again. I think that's what I really want to do. And so thank you, Marsha. And so who's willing to do the next bullet point with me?
I will. It's Lee.
Hi, Lee.
So what are the 3 best reasons for you to make this change?
Well, it's my husband that gave me the banjo, and he's an amazing musician. And so I imagined that over time, it would be a way for me to participate, like, musically in our relationship. Like, we play ukulele together, but that's not quite bluegrass, is it? So as another way to kind of honor my relationship, I had a terrible relationship with music lessons as a child and learning music as a kid. It was just awful. And I don't think it has to be. So sort of as an adult, I would like to build a new relationship with learning music. And I don't want one more thing I quit on. It's really important to me not to quit when things get hard, because sometimes I do that, and I don't want this to be another one of those. So who's willing to do the next one? It's got 2 tiny parts to it.
This is Roxanne. I can go ahead.
Thank you, Roxanne.
That's great, April. I was wondering, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important would you say it is to make this change?
It's a 7. It's a 7.
Wow, that's really good. So I'm wondering, why is it a 7 and not a 0?
Well, it's a 7 partly because I'm sick of this not being resolved yet. Like I'm kind of getting frustrated that it's not happening. I'm losing patience with my excuses. And it's a 7 because I have the best marriage in the world, and this is another way to show up for it, and I really, really want to do that. And so it's about me, and it's about my relationship, honoring the things I said that I wanted to do for myself, and putting myself on my own list. So those are probably the reasons why it's a 7. So who's willing to do the next bullet point? Oh, don't leave me hanging, kids. Someone help me out.
This is Roxanne. I can go again if you like.
Sure, that would be wonderful.
So April, that 7 about how important it is to make this change really shows that you're ready to make, it indicates that you're ready to make this change. So I'm wondering, how might you go about making that change, actually going and doing it?
Well, I think one of the problems is that I'm living on hand-me-down banjo books. Like, I got a banjo, and my husband and some of his friends went, oh, great, oh, good for you, banjo. Hey, here's the books that I learned with. And so I've got a couple of very nice introductory to banjo books, but they aren't ones that I chose, and they aren't ones that kind of called to me. And I think actually, getting some, finding something that was where I wanted to start might actually motivate me a bit more as opposed to trying to sort of replicate someone else's experience. So this one is slightly trickier. I need one of you to tell me a few of the things that I've mentioned as my motivation for why I might change. And you don't have to get all of them, but just tell me a few of them back. So who's willing to do that for me?
I'll do it. It's Marsha. So you, some of the things that have motivated you are that you're sick of it this not being resolved. You have the best marriage in the world, and this is a way that I guess you can celebrate that marriage and participate musically together. And you want to honor yourself. You don't want to quit when things get hard.
And then if you would just ask me that question.
Which question?
The one right underneath it. It says ask. Why don't you just ask me that?
So what do you think you will do?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Okay. What do you think you'll do, April?
Perfect. Thank you, Marsha. I think the idea of getting my own book is kind of the right one. That I think that that's the right thing to do. And so I think when we are done together, I'm gonna send my husband a text message and say, hey, next weekend, I know there's lots going on, but can we go out to Rufus Music Store out in Kitsilano, because they've got a great selection of music books. And I want to pick up a banjo book of my own. I want to pick up something that is the right thing for me, and that feels like I'm curious about it and excited about it and that I want to use it. So I think that, it doesn't solve all the problems, but I think it's a really good first step. So I think that that's what I do. I think I ask for his help, and he loves going to music stores, so he won't say no. So I think that that's the first thing I need to do is get a book that I'm excited about. So I'm really curious. How would that have been different if you all had just told me what to do?
I don't think we would have learned as much about you.
You probably wouldn't have learned as much. That's probably true.
This is Lee, and I'm going to postulate that you may not have had the opportunity to go through the process of really learning the why for you, like to actually go into, wanting to honor your relationship with your husband, and like really peeling down without that space.
So you learned
clear as to the why and coming up with your own solution.
So you guys learned about me. I probably learned about me too. I don't know if there was anyone here who would have told me, oh, well, what you really need to do is go buy a book of your own. That might have been left field enough that it wasn't something that anyone here necessarily would have given me as advice. And so the solution I came up with was probably all my own as well. So you learned about me, and I learned about me too. Do you remember this definition of motivational interviewing? Motivational interviewing is a collaborative conversation style to strengthen a person's own motivation and commitment to change. So what we just did, that skill, give no advice, is based fundamentally in this definition. We worked together. You stood with me and gave me the space and kind of were there for me while I figured out what my own motivation was and built up a little bit of my own commitment. Now, it might be that some of you were disappointed with the level of commitment I came to, because what you wanted me to say is, I'm going to start taking lessons, and I'm going to practice half an hour a day, and I'm going to have an hour and a half lesson every Saturday, and maybe that's what you were hoping to hear from me. But I have more commitment to change now than I did when we started the conversation. I'm taking a step. However small it is, I'm taking a step. I'm taking the step that's right for me. So I hope that you can see how motivational interviewing is baked into that conversation formula. And how if you've got someone who's just not quite ready to make a plan, if you'd said to me at the beginning, so are you ready to make a plan for how you're going to do how you're going to practice your banjo? I probably would have freaked out a little. But giving me the opportunity to work it through actually turns out that I kind of have a little bit of a plan anyway. So that's your first skill. So remember, give no advice is something that we've learned here too. It's a way to speak with people who are ambivalent. And I know you have ambivalent people in your life because we're all ambivalent. Now we're back to the hats. Sorry, go ahead.
Kim joined us partway through that activity, and it looks like April and Roxanne are just joining right now as well. But it looks like you're on mute, so I just wanted to make a note.
April and Kim, right?
Yeah, we've got April, Kim, and Roxanne.
Roxanne, you mean Cindy?
Oh, sorry.
No, Roxanne was here the whole time.
Roxanne was here the whole time.
Roxanne's been here.
She's just having technical difficulties, so she has to come in and out sometimes.
Yes, okay.
And so do we have Cindy at all?
We don't have Cindy yet.
No.
Okay.
But
well, Kim and April, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us. What you were just witnessing, I'm not sure when you got here, was how what we're going to do today is we'll go back and forth between talking about the trade. It's kind of a hats off thing. That was a hats off. I was talking to you as learners, showing you how training Give No Advice is different online than it is in person. So I'd strongly encourage you to go back and watch that section on the webinar, depending on when you came in. Because doing that or doing brief action planning is one of your practice teaching opportunities that you're going to do on Wednesday. So I will crash on. I'm really glad you're here. So hats back on. We're speaking as trainers. When you have the slides from us, there is an example of an ambivalence to guide you written into those slides. I think it's around like getting more sleep. But I really recommend using something that is more or less real for you. That banjo thing is really very real for me. And you would, I would suggest that you would choose that because it helps you make ambivalence normal. In practice, we often tend to treat other people's ambivalence as a pathology, so it helps you make it more normal. I think it was Lee that pointed out that you learned quite a bit about me through that process, and I was sort of willing to be sort of vulnerable and present with you. So it might help your learners connect to you as a person, which is also kind of hard with this technological barrier between us. There's an element of theater in training all the time, and perhaps even more so online. And it also means that if you are willing, that you can show that something not obviously medical can still be health-related. Sometimes our learners in BAP, as we well know, accept a plan to deal with someone's salt intake or high blood pressure as completely legitimate, but plans to have bubble baths or go walks with their sister might look less obviously connected to their health and well-being. So I like to use an example that's from right outside health, because sometimes the things that our people will want to work with are not obviously medical, but definitely attached to our health and well-being. So there is an example to guide you if you need to use it. But I really recommend using a version of an ambivalence that you have or have to make it a little more real for your learners. So I'm curious to know, so far, how is it feeling to participate online? And we were participating relatively evenly among the 3 people who I knew were there because we knew you were there, and there was some pressure. So I'm really curious what you're feeling about the online participation.
This is Lee, and I can speak from being one of that's the first few on the line.
Mm-hmm.
I think because of you lay the context of who is on the line when we first start off, and you kind of know briefly, broadly of who is there, even if it's a number of participants, that makes it easier. And I don't know if it's like I've had 3 years of online schooling when I did my grad studies. I don't know if it was that, but I find it that you can create those communities online that can be just as tight. And it has to do with how it's facilitated and that you're showing up and that you are participating as it goes along, like we have been doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I quite agree that it can become quite a tight community. And I think asking people to introduce themselves right away so then they can hear their own voices online and hear each other's voices online, gets people talking online, can make it a little bit easier as well. There are things that you can do, and so this is one of those questions of like, I'd like you to keep your hat on the side of your head even while you're a learner and imagine, what are you feeling? Why are you feeling it? How could you modify it for your own learners? And always be watching the experience. And Kim and April, I would just like to make sure that we can hear your voices. Kim, can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, I can. And my apologies for being late. I totally had this set for 10 o'clock today, and I don't start work till 8:30. So yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay, Kim. I'm just so glad you're here with us now. And April, I've got to say, my name is April also, and you are the 4th April I've ever met. So welcome, April. Can you hear my voice?
I can, thank you. And I apologize, I had the same excuse. I totally thought it was at 9 instead of 8. I really apologize.
That's okay. I'm really glad you're here with me now. And if there's any questions you have that are outstanding at the end, please feel free to email me. And it might be that it's quite possible we can resolve them over email or just have a quick phone conversation that might sort of bring you up to speed. But in deference to the time, I'm going to crash on and we'll keep this process going today. So were there any questions about what you just saw in terms of the Give No Advice exercise? What questions do you have now? Okay. If questions do occur to you, then you're more than welcome to shoot me an email or ask them in another way. So here's a question for you as facilitators. How long do you wait with absolutely dead airspace to see whether or not there are any questions? And it would be perhaps helpful to you, I found it's been helpful to me, to develop a certain comfort with dead air as a trainer, to sort of put the question out there, and eventually someone will take pity on you. Eventually they will. But let's actually see what 10 seconds feels like starting now. So that is 10 seconds of silence. I would suggest that that's probably the minimum you would give a group. What about longer? Let's see what 20 seconds of dead air feels like. Now I confess, 20 is often longer than I ever get. I tend to panic around 15 seconds. But I'm not sure if you noticed when we were working together before, there were some long silences before people were willing to jump in. And so deciding how long you leave people room to jump in is a decision you'll make as a trainer. Sometimes, if you feel that space is growing and no one is stepping up, you can offer gentle encouragements like, come on, guys, like someone out there knows the answer, or I think you heard me say, like, don't leave me hanging, like come on, someone step up. And people will if you sort of amusingly and gently invite them again. But getting comfort, deciding how long is long enough to ensure that there are no questions or that no one's going to weigh in is a decision you'll make as a trainer, but it's something that you'll need to think about. So we'll go back to the training. We'll jump back in. This is from webinar 2, and the big interactive is in webinar 2 with Ask, Tell, Ask is essentially the same. You'll have slides that represent the flashcards as you demonstrate an ask, a tell, and an ask. So we'll go to webinar 3. This section is, you've told them all about brief action planning, and they're actually going to make one with you now. So, so this section is from webinar 3, and so we're just going to dive right into, so we've talked all about what brief action planning is. We're now going to do brief action planning together. So, sorry, there's going to be a little tiny bit of jumping around because I want to make sure that you get to see all of the differences. So, skill number 1 is a behavioral menu. You know what? I'm going to, what is this? So, yeah, sorry, I lost my orientation there for a moment, and I'm very aware of our time, so forgive me. Hats off, into the training. So the first skill in brief action planning is a behavioral menu, and knowing how to offer a behavioral menu when someone needs it or when they've requested it. It often looks like this. Would you mind if I share with you some ideas that others have used that might fit your situation? And if they're willing, then you share 2 or 3 relevant but not too specific, nicely varied ideas all at once. And the last idea is to prompt one of their own. Some things you might try are this or this or this, or maybe you've had an idea of your own that occurs to you now. Do any of these work for you? And these are the words right out of our guide. You might find over time that you change these words ever so slightly to make them your own. As we do this together, you'll hear me using words that are a little bit different from these because I've sort of slipped off the script a little bit and developed ways to say it that feel right for me. I really recommend you stick to the script as you first go. But understanding behavioral menus is just a little bit tricky. You don't have to be an expert on the topic to create a behavioral menu. You absolutely do not. You aren't picking the right choice for someone. You're sort of priming the pump. You're sparking their ability to get an idea of their own. So I'm going to ask you to build 3 behavioral menus with me now. So if you could just shout out one thing that you would put on a behavioral menu for moving to Mongolia. So who has an idea? I want to move to Mongolia more than anything in the world, but I haven't got the faintest idea how to start. Who has something that could go on that behavioral menu?
Buying a plane ticket to Mongolia.
I could buy a plane ticket. Yeah, I put my money where my mouth is. Buy a plane ticket. Who else has something else that could go on a behavioral menu?
Maybe research it a bit.
Research, absolutely.
Or just maybe not call it research, but look into connecting with others who've been there before.
So there's the universally applicable, you could Google it. And you almost said another one there of connecting with people who, what were you thinking about that?
Others who've gone before or currently, like connecting with a body of folks who are already doing it or have done it.
Who have done it. Well, then that's a beautiful behavioral menu for moving to Mongolia. So let me make that for you now. So I'm wondering if it would be okay if I offered you some ideas that have worked for other people. If yes, then, well, you could try just buying a plane ticket. You could try Googling it, or you could try connecting with others who've already done it. Do any of those ideas feel like they might work for you, or have you had an idea of your own? So together, we just built a lovely behavioral menu for moving to Mongolia, something that I'm assuming that none of you are experts in. Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps someone is freshly back from Mongolia. But that is the skill of a behavioral menu. And when it's really important to understand that you don't have to be an expert, because connecting with others who are in the same boat as you and Googling it are 2 almost universally applicable choices for a behavioral menu if you are sort of absolutely stuck for what it might be if the topic really throws you. So this is not a chance to show off your expertise. It's a chance to get their brains working. That when you say, well, you could buy a plane ticket right now, and inside they go, oh, I'm not ready for that, but you know what I am ready for. So that's exactly what you're trying to do, is prime the pump. So I'm talking hats on, talking to trainers now. You'll see across the bottom, developing community connection, moving to Mongolia, and running a marathon. These are the 3 topics I use. You could use any number of them. I'm not going to have us build all 3 because I wanted you to see how it was done, but I'm looking at our time and I want you to see the brief action planning training. So I'm going to take the liberty of skipping ahead. Back to this, so hats off, so I had a slide for that. So I didn't show you all 3, but hopefully you get the sense of how those are done, and it's all in your slide notes. The next section is from Webinar 3, Practicing Brief Action Planning. There's a couple of ways to do this. You can do a plan with your tech person or the person who's assisting you. You could bring someone specifically for the purpose of playing brief action planning with you, or you can do it with your learners as a team, like we did Give No Advice, which is what we'll do this time, but we'll do it a tiny bit differently. Or there might be another way that you have thought of. I like the team approach because it gets the words coming out of people's mouths without being utterly scary enough of having to do the whole thing yourself. Because the one thing that's weak on webinar learning is the actual opportunity to practice. So they'll have their guide. Please make sure they have their guide in front of them. Help them see where they are on the guide. You'll probably even narrate this over top of making a plan together by saying things like, so I didn't know what I really wanted. We're on 1B now. Do you see how people who have an idea but aren't so sure need a behavioral menu? We're at 1B. So the next person can just use the words that are right there if they want to. And now we're back up at 1A because we're making a smart plan. And now we're down at C. Do you see where we are? And so really, really help them use the guide to follow along. So I'm going to take my hats off and we're going to go back to the training. So we've just finished explaining brief action planning and we're trying to get them to practice for the very first time. Here we go. So now we're going to put it all together. You're going to help me make a plan. I'd love it if you took turns doing pieces of brief action planning with me step by step so you can follow along on the guide as we go. So I'm going to call on you to do a question or a skill. If you need help or you're a little confused, just say so and we can totally help each other. That's not a problem at all. So brief action planning looks like this. Kim, would you be willing to ask me the first question?
Sure. So, April, is there anything you'd like to do for your health in the next week or 2?
Yeah, I travel a lot for work, and I kind of have a hard time getting any exercise while I do it. So I'd really like to figure that out, but I feel like I've tried everything, and I don't really have a good idea of what to try now. So that, because I have an idea but I'm not really sure, would take us to 1B on our guide. We're right in the middle. I'm going to need a behavioral menu now. So, April, why don't you do the behavioral menu with me if you're willing? So all the words are right there on your guide. And remember to start with permission.
So April, I'm hearing that you're kind of unsure about how what to do next. So I'm wondering if you'd be okay if I shared a few ideas with you on
That
what
would
worked for
really,
people in the past.
yeah, that would really be great.
You want me to keep going? Okay.
Yeah, so just give it would be great.
Okay. So I know some people try and incorporate some type of daily activity or something trying to adjust sort of some of their eating habits. Or do you have anything on your own that you would like to that you can think of, or does that spark anything for you?
Well, you know, I think as I listened to that, it's about more than moving around. Like I spend so much time inside, and I don't like being inside all the time. So I think I need fresh air. So I think what I need to do is figure out a way to walk at lunch. If I mean, it can't be too rigid because I never know where I'm going to be. But if I walked at lunchtime, you know, then that could work for me. So, Marcia, would you mind helping me turn that into a smart plan with permission, please? Marcia, are you there, or are you on mute? If you're, that's okay.
I was on mute.
I know you were. So, okay, so let's try that again.
Okay. So many people find it useful to get very specific about their plan. Would that work for you?
Yeah, it's actually probably a really good idea.
All right. So what were you thinking about getting some fresh air?
Well, I think if I do it at lunchtime when I'm traveling and I'm doing a training, and if I just walk like 15 minutes away and then 15 minutes back from wherever I am, because I don't know where I'm going to be, so I can't say I'm going to walk around the block because I might be in a place that doesn't have blocks. So I think if I just walk 15 minutes away and 15 minutes back, every lunchtime when I'm training, when I'm traveling to work and training, then that could really work for me.
So is, in order to do that, is there anything that needs to happen?
No, not really. I think it's just a question of kind of deciding to. Hey, Marcia, a quick tip. One of the most important things about a SMART plan is knowing when this is going to start. So you won't get every detail for every plan, but that's one of the most important ones. So make sure you get that out of me before we're done.
Okay, I will. So when would you do this right at noon, or would you pick a time?
Well, I think giving myself half an hour means that like I've got 15 minutes on either side usually for an hour lunch, and so I could, and if someone's going to need something, then I could leave a little bit later. But I think if I sort of maybe it's 10 minutes, if I could definitely do 10 minutes both directions. Yeah, 10 minutes both directions at lunchtime whenever I'm traveling for work, I think is the plan.
And so I'm just trying to understand, so you would do this right when lunch started, or?
Well, it's going to kind of depend. Like, I'm not in complete control. Like, if I've been having technology issues, or if someone's got handouts, so I might not be able to do it, like, say, like at noon, I'm going to drop the mic and race out the door. But over the course of lunchtime, I'm going to make sure that I've saved myself 20 minutes, so that I might leave at 10 after, I might leave at quarter after, but I'm going to walk at lunchtime.
And are you going to do this every time that you're training?
Yeah, every time I'm training.
And when would you like to start?
Well, I'm doing a training in the Kootenays next week, so I could do this on Wednesday of next week when I'm in the Kootenays is when I start. That's the first training I'm away for. So I'll start next Wednesday. And why don't you do the commitment statement with me too, because it's also green there.
Okay, sounds good. So it sounds like you have a plan. Just so we're both clear, can you tell me what your plan is?
Yeah, I'm going to walk at lunchtime for 20 minutes every time I train, starting next Wednesday when I'm in the Kootenays. So that gets us through that. Roxanne, would you do the next blue question with me, please?
Sure. So Alice, it sounds like you have some really solid ideas of how to carry out your plan. And so I'm wondering now about how sure you feel about carrying out that plan. So considering a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 means you're really not sure at all, and 10 means that you're very confident or very sure. How sure or confident are you about completing this plan?
I'm like a 4. So, ladies, it's a hat moment again. I'm noticing that it's a little bit past 9:15, and I only have about 12 minutes more of your time. So I'm wondering what you're thinking. We could continue on with you watching how this is done, but I'm sort of thinking that you probably are getting an idea of how this is done. With the check on progress, what you would do is have someone design that check on you, and then you would pretend to do it with the next person, and you would do the okay, so I'm going to check in on the phone with my friend in a week, and then, ring, ring, hey, Lee, so you're on the phone with me now, do the check on progress with me. So you can actually get all the way through this. I strongly encourage you to make them use all the skills, but I want to make sure that I have, pardon me? I heard a voice. Who was that? Oh, no, I'm just hallucinating voices. I just want to make sure we have enough time to talk about the practice teaching assignment and what's coming next. And I'm aware that other conversations we had took a little longer than I thought. So that's probably down to me. So that's what that looks like. Here's how we're back to our hats. So first of all, I'd really like to know what it was like knowing I might call on you. That's what we did differently this time. What was that like?
It was a bit scary, and it also made it also implied you better be paying attention.
Yeah, it does a couple of things. If I'm honest, I rarely do it as a trainer, but there might be reasons why you choose to do that. And can any of you think what some of those reasons might be that you would put them in this slightly scary, slightly hyper-attentive state?
Participation.
Participation, absolutely. How even is it? Is it happening at all? Totally. Are there any other reasons you can think of?
Accountability.
Accountability, sure, absolutely. Like, are you, stepping up?
You can't read body language, and so and because it's hard to it's hard to time people. So this is a good way to have things move smoothly and keep a little bit of flow.
Totally. The reasons I suggested as a list that I would use are things like time constraints, levels of participation, evenness of participation, like am I always hearing from the same 3 people, or am I not hearing from anyone, or like are we almost out of time now because they're taking 20 seconds to respond every single time, and your preferences as a trainer, like you might be more or less comfortable with the idea of doing this, so that's going to play into it too. But I wanted you to feel the possible impending scariness of knowing what it's like if you might be called on. But it's a choice that you can make as a trainer too. And these are some of the reasons why you might choose to do it, all of which you mentioned. And then additionally, what are your preferences? Like how do you like to run a training? And what do you have the tolerance for airspace, and what are your requirements for participation? So those are, you listed all of the ones that I was thinking. So I'm wondering what questions you have about what you saw with the brief action planning training like that, especially in light of the fact that it'll be one of your options as a practice training for Wednesday. I'm sorry, I did need to cut that short for you. I apologize. That was my poor time management. What questions do you have now?
When you're doing this with individuals, so it'll be their first time doing it, would you maybe make sure that you don't provide too many, or would you not give any feedback during that process? Would you give feedback at the end? Just how would you do that?
If someone had launched into the behavioral menu without asking permission, for example, I might say, oh, whoop, 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 whoop. If you look at your guide, like, we're in 1B, and 1BA says permission first. So you're doing beautifully. Back up a second and just ask me permission first. So I might correct in the moment. I wouldn't let them do it and go, well, that was very nice, but you totally forgot to ask permission, so you failed. It really does sort of need to be kind of live and in the moment. So I don't hesitate to interrupt people, and I really try to just get them to use the words on the guide so they are all paying attention to how it works. Because the guide's sort of weird and tricky. Like if they need one thing, you go to 1B, but then you always go back up to 1A, and you always end on 1C, and it's just a little weird. And if I know that people tend to forget to ask permission, I'll sort of remind them before they even start. I think I did that with Marcia, like, hey, could you make a smart plan and don't forget to ask with permission, start with permission. And so feedback in the moment is pretty minimal. You're just trying to get words to come out their mouths and to make sure they're all really following the guide. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And this is also how I do it. You might ultimately, as a trainer, choose to do it a little differently. What other questions do you have now? Okay. let's get down to the meat of this. So your mission now is to prepare one of the practice teaching assignments for the webinar next Wednesday. Some of you are on the webinar at 8 and some of you are on the webinar at 10. There are 2 to choose from. You can do Give No Advice, or you can do Practicing Brief Action Planning. So if there are 3 or 4 of you on a webinar, some of you will be doing the same section, and that's totally okay. It doesn't matter at all. That's just kind of the nature of the beast, and it's absolutely fine. Here are a couple of things you need to know about that assignment. You need to include the interactive exercise. Otherwise, you've had lots of choice in kind of how you do it, but please take the opportunity to include what's different in webinar training. You can choose pieces of material for the sort of straight delivery as well to try both. Both practice teaching assignments include like introducing the definitions of motivational interviewing as well as doing Give No Advice. So you do not have to have a smooth transition. You can just say, and now I'm skipping ahead 8 slides to do Give No Advice. So it's completely up to you. I want you to experience both. I want you to experience turning slides while you basically do the regular same old, and then doing one of the slightly different interactive ones is what I'm hoping you'll take the opportunity to experience here. So if you want to do some straight delivery slides and then skip a whole bunch to do the interactive, it's fine. You'll just tell us what you're doing. This is about your chance to practice, not us learning. Hide slides you don't need and have it all ready to go on your desktop, because Danielle or Troy will hand you the power and your screen will come up. So we will see for a moment your backdrop, your backdrop photo or your desktop on your computer, and then you'll bring up the slide into projection mode. So know that we will see that for a moment. So if it's a lovely photo of your wedding, you might wish to leave it there, and if it's a terrible, horrible photo of you having a blowout at a family reunion, you might wish to change it because suddenly we will all see it. You have 10 minutes, 10 minutes to practice doing these exercises. You'll need to track your own time, though. There's no one, I can't hold up a 2-minute card for you, so you'll have to figure out how you're going to track your own time. I will interrupt you if you've gotten to like 10 minutes and 45 seconds with no end in sight. I'll jump in and say that you're over time, but otherwise you'll need to track your own time. And you cannot see your slide notes when you are in the projection mode for GoToMeeting. You cannot see them. If you feel you need them, you might choose to print them out so you can have them on the desk in front of you. If you do that, you might wish to wear a headset to limit the sound of paper rustling. But you cannot see your slide notes. It's super important you know that before you get there, because that's another thing that's kind of different in webinar. You might have different technology ultimately, but with GoToWebinar, that's what happens. And so what questions now do you have about the practice teaching assignment that we're going to do together on Wednesday?
So Danielle is going to send all of us out a link then to this material?
Yeah.
Danielle?
Yeah,
okay.
I'll send you a link. And actually, April, do you mind if I take the presentership for a minute and I'll just show them the website?
Totally, rip it away from me. That's perfect.
Okay.
Do I need to surrender it to you, or can you just take it?
I think I've got it.
Oh, you don't? Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Do you see it?
Yes.
So here's the website, and you'll see the heading Assignments, Week 1. And there are practice teaching assignment instructions that you can download, and it'll just have an overview of each of the activities. Looks like this, and has some of the notes that April just outlined for you. And there's a link to the daily practice and feedback. I'll also be sending you that by email. And then you'll see the webinar materials are here. So you've got your slides as well as the PDFs if you choose to print them. And in your practice teaching assignments, it'll tell you which slides are for which activities and which week those slides are in. So you've got the Ask, Tell, Ask, I think, is in Webinar 1, and BAP is in Webinar 3.
It's give no advice in webinar 1 and
sorry.
BAP in webinar 3. No, it's totally fine. Before we confuse people further. Now what questions do you have seeing this?
It's April. I just, and you probably mentioned this at the beginning, so I apologize that I missed it. Has this webinar been recorded?
Yes, and it'll appear here. Where will it appear, Danielle?
I will add a new heading that has recordings of webinars and add it to the paper. Yeah.
Thank you.
And when you do your practice teaching, you can choose to call on us. You can choose to let us volunteer. You can make all those choices as a trainer. It's sort of whatever you would like to experience. I would encourage you to experience the terror of dead air, but that is just sort of, you know, what I think is important, and it might be very, very different for you. Let me see. I am just looking at, you know, I'm not going to take power back from Danielle because we're done, and also because there's no real slides of consequence. Just to say, you're going to be getting a survey to give feedback for the webinar today. You'll get that after every webinar, and then you'll get sort of a final wrap-up one with the last webinar. So please, please, please take the time to do that. It would really deeply, I would benefit as a trainer, and we would benefit as an organization from your feedback. So please don't hesitate to give that to us. But I am greatly pleased to find that we are essentially done at 9:30, though I recognize I shorted you a little bit on seeing how BAP was done. I believe we're all connected on email, so please feel free to email me any questions you have. But I will hear your lovely voices all again on Wednesday, some of you at 8 and some of you at 10. So if you need to go now, because it's 90 minutes after we started, then please feel free to. If you don't need to run away and you have any questions, I'm happy to stay. So I'll say goodbye to the lovely ones who need to run away. And does anyone who can stay a moment have any questions?
April, I just have a couple. It's Marcia.
Totally.
Okay. So next webinar, we're going to practice 10 minutes each. So is that going to be basically the extent of the webinar is practicing, or is there a bit of more of a component to it?
This is essentially the practice teaching equivalent of the face-to-face training that you did. So I want to make sure we have enough time that you can practice for 10 minutes, your colleagues can give you feedback for 5, the next person can practice for 10, and your colleagues can give you feedback for 5. So it's going to depend on how many people who are there. If there are 2 of you on one of the webinars and we're done in 40 minutes and there are questions or other things to talk about, I am happy to do that. But the intent of the next webinar is really to give you a chance to practice, because once we've actually practiced, we'll probably have a bunch more questions, and those are the ones that I really want to address in webinar 3. Because the assignment between webinar 1 and webinar 2 is essentially, what are you afraid of now you've tried, and asking you to give some thought to how you might design a training, which will bring up some questions for you that we can then address in webinar 3. So dominantly, the point of webinar 2 is for you to actually be driving this bus and seeing what it feels like. I'm curious, was that what you hoped to hear, or would you hope to hear that there was a little more content coming?
No, I didn't have any druthers either way. I'm happy just to practice. It's good for, you know, getting to the next step. So, yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm more than open to hear that that's a crushing disappointment and there was something else that you were hoping for. I really just want all of you to have the opportunity to drive this bus, and then we'll talk about it, because it's a curious bus to drive. What other questions? Sorry, go ahead, Lee.
I'm just juggling times in my head, and I'll follow up with emails around either the 8 or the 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the webinar.
Okay, now, Marcia, how do you want to do that? Are people already sort of signed up for one or the other, or are they still coordinating?
Yeah, I did kind of sign up people but if they need to switch, then that's fine too. We'll just have to make sure there's enough. So Lee, I had actually put you at in the 10 to 11:30. So maybe we can quickly, is that okay with you, 10 to 11:30?
For this Wednesday, it's going to work better. And I had some misunderstandings about that, and I think I've gone into my calendar and I canceled, not understanding. So what I want to make sure is that if there is room, that I am scheduled for that 10 o'clock on Wednesday, just because, yeah.
Yep, you are scheduled.
Perfecto, thank you.
And then Kim, you're scheduled for the same time, so is that going to work for you?
Oh, I'm not sure Kim is still with us.
Okay, and then the 8 to 9:30 was Roxanne and April, and Cindy and Jasmine. I'll have to find out about Cindy, and I know Jasmine's not participating anymore, so I'll find out about Cindy. So, does that work for you too, Roxanne and April? 8 to 9:30.
I will be sure to be on time this time. 8 o'clock to my head.
And Roxanne, that works for you?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Marcia.
Okay. Because I can always be the person who kind of tries to balance out the things.
That'd be really kind, Marcia, if you were willing to sort of show, just so there's a little more of an audience to ask to participate.
Okay.
That'd be
sure,
super.
And I'll find out about Cindy too, what happened. So, okay.
And that'll be an interesting, if she does choose to sort of watch the first webinar and then continue to participate, it'll be interesting to know what that experience is too, because as trainers and as an organization, that's a decision you're going to be making. Can someone just watch the webinars and have learned BAP, or do they have to be there? So can someone have just watched the first webinar and be a BAP online trainer and show up and practice? And so we'll, I would love to find that out too. So we'll learn. We'll learn from Cindy's experience if she continues with us.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, does anyone else have another question? Or what other? Sorry, let me do that better. What other question does anyone still have? That's what I meant. You all feel totally prepared for Wednesday.
Sorry.
I planted it that way. So what are your concerns about Wednesday? What questions do you have remaining?
For me, this is Lee. For me, it'll come as I start working through the process.
Yeah. And this is the joy. This is there's nobody here but us chickens, right? It's this completely safe place to go, oh, well, that doesn't work at all, like that, or well, that's weird. And so, yeah, this is a safe place to go ahead and do that. So that's the point.
Exactly. Thank you.
Well, if no one else has anything pressing, I appreciate your extra few minutes to let us iron out some details. And I am excited to hand over the wheels of the bus to you all on Wednesday.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Lovely to meet all of you, and I'll see you in a couple of days.
Thanks, April. Bye.
All right. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Danielle, will you be here with me for a moment?
I will, yeah.
Okay, we can probably stop recording. Is that what that little pulsing red button means?
Yes.